Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on Uncover Network Vulnerabilities with Continuous Security Assessments. Um, I'm your presenter today. My name is George Logarakis. I'm a senior demo engineer here at NetBrain, and I'll be taking you through this presentation and demonstration today. Before I begin, I do want to do a little housekeeping. Like most of our webinars, you can ask questions anytime during the presentation. Microphones are muted, but you can type your questions in the Q&A box um, provided. Um, Also, the webinar is being recorded, so if you miss any part of the presentation, you can rewatch it from our website in a couple days' time. We do advise you to watch in full screen mode so you don't miss any details. There's also a poll on the screen. I think I saw one vote in there already, so feel free to cast your votes in the poll. It definitely helps us cater content for future webinars, as well as maybe some discussion points for this webinar. So this webinar is actually part of a webinar series for 2024 that's called Think Automation First. Every other week, we demonstrate NetBrain automated assessment and dashboard technology live. The idea is to show you how you can automate repetitive tasks that's and these tasks that significantly slow down management of the network. You can register to watch the rest of this series from our website and even catch past webinars on demand. Just browse to the URL here on screen and sign up. And here what you're seeing is the different topics for the webinar. So incident response, network security assessments, which is what we're talking about today. The next one will be application delivery, then lifecycle management, cloud network insights, um, what's new in NetBrain, proactive outage prevention, capacity management, visualization, and then a look ahead to 2025 and what network automation would look like in 2025. So a lot of exciting stuff on the way. So please go ahead and sign up here at the link below. Um, Sorry, my slides seem to have mixed up here. Here we go. So, um, sorry, before we go into the live demo, I do want to talk about network security enforcement and how NetBrain does this and some examples of what we can do. So what NetBrains allow us to do is use network intents, so use network automation to define, verify, and enforce things like security configurations, rules, and designs, as well as, of course, validate that your designs are not vulnerable, or also ensuring that um, no device on your network are open to any current vulnerabilities, right? Um, so there's a lot of different angles that this can work from. Let's see some examples. So from the security configuration perspective, we can ensure that configurations such as AAA, TACACS, ACLs, and SSH um, are complying with your corporate standards as well as any compliance frameworks that you want to comply that you need to comply with, right? So making sure they follow the standards, make sure they actually follow your organization standards as well, and we'll identify any deviations from that standard. So this AAA points to a different group. You'll be able to know about it, and you can make those changes. Rules. So these are those security rules that are, best practices. Again, they can come from compliance, um, but it's things like firewall rules should not have any source and/or any destination defined, right? It should be a specific destination or destination list of subnets. Access ports should have PPTUR configured, could be another one. Of course, this could also be any compliance rules that you need to follow as well. And then user-defined design. So these are the designs that you're actually going to architect for your own network. So for example, with network segmentation, a design is going to be no communication can occur between the DMZ and enterprise network segments. That's both ways. So that's a design that then we can use NetBrain automation to enforce, to continuously verify and enforce that that design is not being breached. So let's go ahead and jump into a demo so you can see this in action. And again, I will mention before I jump into the demo, if you do have any questions, please type them in the Q&A. Um, I am monitoring that so I'll be able to answer your questions at any time. So let's go ahead and um, jump into the demo. So I'm going to start here with a NetBrain summarized dashboard view. This dashboard is showing a sample of different security assessments that we have ran across our network and that you could use NetBrain to run across your network. And I'll go through kind of each section here one by one. So, and kind of take a deep dive in each part. So, security configuration assessment. This is what I was talking about, your AAAs, your ACLs, your TACACs, your SSH. We can validate that those configurations are meeting your golden standard, right? Where that's a company standard, right? A TACAC server needs to be this IP, AAA needs to be configured this way on all devices, or at least at a certain site for those devices. As you can see here, we're doing it by a couple sites, things like that. And we can go ahead and validate this across the network and tell you where those variations are. And then you can become fully compliant with your organization's security policies and make sure those configurations match the gold standards. So let's take a look at an example here. We can see, I've run a few different ones. I'm going to look at AAA authentication validation, and I'll click on the red section here that's identifying some problems. And I can see here I have a bunch of alerts. Let me go ahead to this one, and I'll open the automation. And you can see here it's telling me that the AAA does not match the golden. And you see here I have a golden AAA configuration, right? Or a couple of golden configurations. Now I can go ahead and actually scroll down here and see that in the configuration for the authentication portion, authorization, we had a separate line in the dashboard. But authentication should, in this device has the default group as TACACS plus local and enable default enable. When we look here, it has to match either default group TACACS plus enable group or group management local or group management enable. And you can see that it's not matching that configuration. Therefore, NetBrain is able to tell us that the configuration does not match any of our golden configurations. Um, so this is a device that we would need to go ahead then and remediate this issue. And we can do this for any kind of configuration that we want to have as our golden. So I have a few examples here, but this is definitely, we can expand the possibilities, right? Any kind of security configurations can be validated network wide as often as you want. So we're doing this once a day to ensure we're always compliant. But this can be done even multiple times per day. This little box here, just so you know, is telling me the devices with the most alerts. So you can see here when I hover over here, this device has alerts coming from a few different assessments that we're running. So the configuration assessment, the rule checks, and our compliance audit are all have alerts related to this particular device, and it's the device with the most alerts. And so we can even see it from that level as well. Moving on to the next section, security rule checks. So I mentioned firewall policies don't have any configuration, BPD guard. We'll take a look at the firewall policies because we can even extend, and what this shows, rather, is we can even extend these checks to um, different parts of the network. It's not all just going to be on our routers and switches. We could do this on a firewall. So this is looking at our firewalls and telling us if there's any policies that have any source and any destination configured. And I can go ahead again and look at those alerts, and I can see on this Palo Alto, we're actually looking at the Palo Alto, and we're seeing that there's a couple of rules here that have source any and destination any. So there's some rules here on this device that look pretty basic, and we're flagging those as problems, right? They're breaking our security rules, and that's probably also compliance rules as well, but they're breaking, some of the golden security rules. We can quickly identify that, and you can see, and it's just by running an automation, even on all kinds of network devices, we're able to do this. We can even do all these automations over API into things like the cloud um, or software-defined networking. Um, the next uh, section here talks about user-defined rules. So these are the rules that your team, so your architects or your team, would create in the network, those designs you would create, and then you want to continuously enforce it, right? If I build network segmentation, I want to make sure that segmentation doesn't break and then two zones that shouldn't communicate now can communicate, right? Um, and that's what I was talking about in the slide too with this example. So I can go here and we'll go ahead and actually view this. We can see here we've ran it on a few devices, but we can actually view this on a map level as well to kind of show what's powering this section of the dashboard. So we've actually built a map, and I'll zoom out here a little bit. We've actually built a map about this rule. So DMC is Security Zone Access Policy. You can see our four regions here, or our four zones uh, on this firewall. And our design is that uh, enter communication between enterprise and DMZ is denied, right? And we can say it's being denied by these rules. So we can validate this design in many different ways. If I go here, I can see the automation that was built to validate this. It's trying some basic connectivity checks from devices in other zones to make sure that the rules are being followed. Um, it's also making sure it's also can look at the firewall rules and analyze it that way. And also make sure the firewall policies are compliant with our golden, right? We're making sure these firewall policies are compliant with the rules and also not changing. We could also use NetBrains A to B path functionality to validate this as well. And I think it's a really cool security tool because we can even get more visibility and confirm exact rules that are in use. So if I go to US NYC Enterprise Switch 1, and then I'm just going to take a quick peek here, and then I'm going to use 10.8.8.250, which is the IP of the DMZ switch. So I'm looking at enterprise to DMZ, and I expect this to fail. So I'll be able to run this path. So beyond using automation to look at the configurations on the device, let me put that into practice and have NetBrain actually try and calculate the path through those 2 points. And you'll see here, NetBrain is going to go ahead and look at these configurations and try and see if communication from here will be able to get to the destination. And you can see here that it fails. And not only are we telling you that it fails, we're telling you that it's being denied by policy interzone default um, index 8. And you can look up here, enterprise DMZ deny index 8. This is matching our design. So now we even get that visual confirmation that that's being blocked. Now, if this somehow went through, this is going to tell us what policy is allowing it through, and we immediately know the problematic policy, right? And that's I think what's so great, right? We can do this so efficiently with and come at it with multiple different angles. But this is the user defined, excuse me, uh, define rules section, how we can actually enforce your designs. Now, the last section here talks about compliance. Now, there's a lot of compliance standards that your organization probably has to follow, right? Could be NIST, could be PCI, could be, if you're in the power industry, it could be NERC. There's a lot of different designs. So you can actually build checks based on the rules of that compliance framework. You can build that with automation. So you can see here the different checks we're running on these devices. So, is Telnet enabled, right? It's a basic one. Devices with unused ports that aren't shut down, disabled, we're ensuring that SNMP v3 is configured. If it's not, it's a problem. Things like this, right? All these different compliance um, frameworks can be put in here as well. Another thing that we can do when it comes to vulnerability assessment is that when we learn about a vulnerability, in minutes we can build an automation to then assess our entire network to see where that vulnerability or where we could be exposed to that vulnerability. So there's many different options here of what you can look for. And this dashboard is kind of I think, a really great view of all the different ways we can assess and continuously assess network security on our network. Um, so that's kind of a brief demo or a good demo, a brief demo of how NetBrain helps with network security assessment. Um, we have a few more minutes here, so again, if there's any questions, please type them in the Q&A box, and I'll be happy to answer. I'll give a few minutes to see if questions come in. Um, then we'll wrap up. Okay, I didn't see any. Oh, someone's typing in the chat. I can see. Can you show the network analysis? Um, can you be a little more specific with that? Is there a certain analysis you want to see? Um, so so NetBrain doesn't do yeah, so NetBrain it analyzes from the configuration perspective, so more of a device hardening perspective. So we're not analyzing actual network traffic. We could look at things like, I've seen examples of for customers where we look at the firewall and we look at the number of uh, DNS or number of connections to see if there's a possible DDoS attack. But NetBrain is not um, analyzing network traffic for anomalies, right? It's looking at configuration to make sure that things are hardened, to make sure that firewall rules are configured properly. So from that perspective, that you're not exposed that way. Yeah, right. Yeah. Is there anything else? If there are any other questions, you can type in the chat like JD did here. Because I think the Q&A disappeared. It's okay. Uh, I see someone else typing. So, um, yes. So the question is, will you have a recording of this? Yes. So this presentation is being recorded, and you'll be able to view it um, in the next couple of days. Yeah, no problem at all. Let's give it another. I'll just give it another minute here. I want to make sure that if people do have questions, that they do get answered. Um, join late. Is there any slide deck? So again, the webinar is recorded, so you'll see all the slides um, that were shared at the beginning. It's really only a couple of slides, so you'll be able to see that content in the recording and um, as well. There's also great resources on our website. I think a lot of this content is there as well, um, so you can also go there. Okay, so I don't see any other questions. So thank you all for attending, and we hope you join for the rest of the webinar series.